The documents started surfacing in August 2019. Internal memos, presidential directives, conversations that seemed too absurd to be real. The President of the United States wanted to buy Greenland, not as a joke, not as a negotiating tactic. He genuinely wanted the United States to purchase the world's largest island from Denmark, and he was furious when they said no. At first, it seemed like another bizarre headline in an administration full of them. But when you examine the pattern, when you trace the obsession with territorial expansion, the disregard for diplomatic norms, the mixing of personal business interests with state policy, you start to see something more disturbing than a strange real estate fixation. You see a blueprint for how financial interests can corrupt foreign policy, how presidential power can be weaponized for personal gain, and how the guardrails that are supposed to prevent such abuse have been systematically dismantled. Let me walk you through what actually happened with Greenland, what it reveals about governance under Trump, and why this pattern matters far beyond one failed land deal. The Greenland proposal. What actually happened? In the summer of 2019, President Trump became fixated on acquiring Greenland. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the New York Times, confirmed by multiple administration officials, Trump repeatedly raised the idea in meetings with advisors. He asked his White House counsel to research the legal mechanisms for purchasing territory. He instructed aides to explore whether Greenland could be traded for something else. He was, by all accounts, serious. The proposal wasn't entirely without strategic merit on paper. Greenland holds significant deposits of rare earth minerals, elements critical for electronics, defense systems, and renewable energy technology. China currently dominates global rare earth production, creating genuine national security concerns. Greenland also offers strategic military positioning in the Arctic, which is becoming increasingly important as climate change opens new shipping routes and resource access. But here's where it gets revealing. Trump didn't approach this as a careful foreign policy initiative. He approached it like a real estate transaction. According to the Wall Street Journal, he compared it to a large real estate deal. When advisors tried to explain the diplomatic complexities, that Greenland is a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark with its own government, that Denmark is a NATO ally, that you can't just buy and sell territories in the 21st century, Trump reportedly brushed aside these concerns. The Danish government's response was unequivocal. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen called the idea absurd. Greenland's foreign minister stated clearly that Greenland is not for sale. These weren't negotiating positions. They were statements of basic sovereignty. Trump's reaction revealed everything. He canceled a planned state visit to Denmark, calling the prime minister's comments nasty. He took to Twitter to attack Danish leadership. He treated diplomatic rejection like a failed business deal, responding with the same petulance he might show to a real estate seller who wouldn't accept his offer. The financial dimension. Following the money. Here's what makes the Greenland obsession particularly concerning: the potential for financial conflicts of interest. Trump never fully divested from his business empire. He placed assets in a trust controlled by his sons, but he retained the ability to withdraw money at any time. His financial disclosure form showed business interests and debts that created ongoing conflicts between his personal finances and his presidential duties. Rare earth minerals are extraordinarily valuable. Companies that secure mining rights to significant deposits can see their valuations skyrocket. During Trump's presidency, there was documented interest from private investors in Greenland's mineral wealth. The question that was never adequately answered: were there any discussions about Trump Organization involvement in potential Greenland development? We know from reporting that Trump mixed personal business with presidential duties in other contexts. The emoluments cases documented foreign governments spending money at Trump properties while seeking favorable policy decisions. The Trump Hotel in Washington became a gathering place for those seeking access to the administration. His golf courses hosted foreign officials and domestic political figures, creating constant opportunities for mixing business and state. The pattern raises obvious questions about Greenland. If the United States had somehow acquired rights to territory with valuable mineral deposits, who would have gotten the development contracts? Would Trump-connected businesses have been positioned to profit? We don't have smoking gun evidence of a specific scheme, but we have a demonstrated pattern of Trump using presidential power to benefit his financial interests. The market manipulation precedent. To understand why the Greenland situation matters, you need to understand Trump's history with market manipulation and pump-and-dump schemes, not as president, but in his business career. In the 1980s and 1990s, Trump was repeatedly involved in ventures where he'd generate massive publicity around a project, attract investors, then exit before the inevitable collapse. Trump Shuttle, Trump Steaks, Trump University, Trump Vodka. The pattern was consistent. Create hype, bring in money, take fees and payments, leave others holding the losses. Trump's casino bankruptcies are particularly instructive. He'd open properties with enormous fanfare, load them with debt, pay himself consulting and management fees, then declare bankruptcy when the debt became unsustainable. Bondholders lost billions. Trump walked away, his fees already collected. The Securities and Exchange Commission has investigated Trump-related entities multiple times. While Trump himself was never charged with securities fraud, the pattern of using publicity to inflate asset values, then extracting money before the correction, is well documented in his business history. Now apply that pattern to presidential power. What happens when someone with that background controls the ability to move markets with official statements? What happens when presidential announcements can cause stocks to surge or crash? The actual market impact of presidential statements. We don't need to speculate about Trump's ability to move markets. We have documented examples throughout his presidency. When Trump tweeted about specific companies, praising some, attacking others, stock prices moved immediately. A positive Trump tweet could add billions to a company's market cap. A negative tweet could wipe out equivalent value. This created obvious opportunities for those with advanced knowledge of what Trump might say. The most concerning pattern involved defense and aerospace stocks. Trump would tweet about military spending, about specific weapon systems, about foreign military sales. Defense contractor stocks would move on these statements, and Trump had extensive connections to defense industry figures through Mar-a-Lago memberships, campaign donors, and business relationships. Congressional insider trading laws don't apply to the president. While members of Congress are restricted from trading on non-public information they receive in their official capacity, no such restrictions bind the president. Trump could legally trade stocks based on decisions he was about to announce. His family members could do the same. His close associates could benefit from advance knowledge. We know this happened in at least one documented case. Trump's Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, was found to have maintained significant financial holdings in companies affected by his policy decisions. The Office of Government Ethics referred Ross for potential criminal prosecution, though the Justice Department declined to pursue charges. The rare earth element connection. Let's dig deeper into why Greenland specifically matters in the context of financial conflicts. Rare earth elements are critical to modern technology. Neodymium, dysprosium, terbium. These aren't household names, but they're essential for everything from smartphones to wind turbines to military systems. The United States is almost entirely dependent on imports for these materials, with China controlling roughly 80% of global production. This creates genuine national security vulnerability. If China decided to restrict rare earth exports, it could cripple American defense production. The Pentagon has identified this as a critical strategic weakness. During the Trump administration, there was significant interest in developing alternative rare earth sources. Greenland was seen as one potential solution. But here's where it gets murky. The companies positioned to benefit from Greenland mining development had connections to Trump orbit figures. One company in particular drew attention: USA Rare Earth. In 2019-2020, this company was actively pursuing Greenland opportunities. Its investor presentations explicitly mentioned the Trump administration's focus on rare earth supply chains. The company's stock price was highly volatile, swinging wildly on news about trade policy and supply chain initiatives. We don't have evidence of direct Trump family investment in these companies, but we do have a pattern where Trump administration policy announcements would benefit specific firms, and those firms had connections to Trump donors, Mar-a-Lago members, or business associates. The question isn't whether there was definitely a specific scheme around Greenland rare earth minerals. The question is whether adequate safeguards existed to prevent such a scheme, and the answer is clearly no. The diplomatic damage beyond financial concerns. The Greenland episode revealed profound damage to America's diplomatic standing. Denmark is one of America's oldest allies. Danish forces have fought alongside American troops in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other conflicts. Denmark hosts critical radar installations that are part of U.S. missile defense systems. The relationship is built on decades of military cooperation and shared democratic values. Trump treated this ally like a business adversary. When Denmark wouldn't entertain his offer, he canceled a state visit, an extraordinary diplomatic insult. He attacked the Danish prime minister personally. He suggested that Denmark was treating the United States unfairly, as if refusing to sell territory was somehow hostile. The broader message to allies was chilling. This administration views relationships transactionally. Everything is negotiable. Sovereignty, treaties, shared values, all can be overridden if the price is right. European leaders watched the Greenland episode and understood that Trump saw them not as partners in a liberal democratic order, but as counterparties in real estate negotiations. This fundamentally undermined trust and cooperation on critical issues from trade to security to climate change. The pattern of territorial ambitions. Greenland wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern of Trump expressing interest in acquiring or controlling foreign territory. He repeatedly suggested that the United States should take Iraq's oil. To the victor belong the spoils, he said, describing a 19th century approach to conquest that violates modern international law and the Geneva Conventions. He proposed buying the Golan Heights from Syria, territory that Syria doesn't recognize as Israeli to begin with, showing a fundamental misunderstanding of the conflict. He mused about taking over Venezuela, reportedly asking advisors why the military couldn't just invade and take control of the country's oil reserves. This pattern reveals a worldview where territorial sovereignty is negotiable, where military power justifies taking resources, where international law is an obstacle rather than a framework. It's a worldview fundamentally at odds with the post-World War II international order that the United States helped create. The authoritarian playbook. Trump's approach to Greenland fits a broader pattern we've seen in authoritarian leaders, using nationalist rhetoric about territorial expansion to distract from domestic problems and consolidate political support. Russian President Vladimir Putin has used territorial claims and annexations, Crimea, eastern Ukraine, claims on former Soviet territories, to boost domestic popularity and justify authoritarian measures at home. Chinese President Xi Jinping has used territorial assertions in the South China Sea and regarding Taiwan to rally nationalist sentiment and strengthen Communist Party control. The rhetoric is always similar: historical claims, strategic necessity, restoring national greatness. The reality is often about domestic politics and personal power consolidation. Trump's Make America Great Again slogan inherently suggests a period of greatness that needs to be restored. The Greenland proposal fits this narrative, expanding American territory, securing resources, demonstrating strength. It's nationalism as political strategy. The investigation that didn't happen. Here's what's particularly frustrating about the Greenland situation. We don't actually know the full story because adequate investigation never occurred. Congressional oversight was hampered by Trump's blanket refusal to cooperate with investigations. Administration officials routinely ignored subpoenas. Documents were withheld. Potential witnesses were instructed not to testify. The financial conflicts specifically were never fully investigated. Trump's tax returns, which might have revealed business interests relevant to Greenland mining or rare earth companies, weren't released until after his presidency ended, and even then, only through legal compulsion. The Office of Government Ethics, which is supposed to monitor conflicts of interest, was systematically undermined during the Trump administration. Career ethics officials resigned in protest. Referrals for potential violations were ignored. What we're left with is a pattern of concerning behavior, obvious conflicts of interest, and a demonstrated willingness to mix personal financial interests with presidential policy, but without the thorough investigation needed to establish exactly what happened. The broader market manipulation concerns. The Greenland episode fits into larger concerns about market manipulation during the Trump presidency. Trump's trade war with China provides the clearest example. Trump would tweet about tariffs, causing immediate market swings. Those with advanced knowledge of what Trump would announce, and when he would announce it, had opportunity to profit enormously. A 2019 analysis by researchers at MIT and the University of Toronto found unusual trading patterns around Trump's trade policy announcements. Specific stocks would see abnormal trading volume and price movements in the hours before Trump's tweets, suggesting that some traders had advanced knowledge. While this could be explained by sophisticated algorithms predicting Trump's behavior, It also raises the possibility of insider trading by those with access to Trump's communication plans. The challenge is that investigating this is extraordinarily difficult. The president's communications are protected by executive privilege. His close advisors can claim similar protections. Financial records are shielded by privacy laws unless criminal investigation is opened. We're left with suspicious patterns, but limited ability to investigate further without political will from Congress or the Justice Department to pursue answers. The Greenland development that did happen. Here's an ironic coda. While Trump's purchase proposal went nowhere, American companies did increase their interest in Greenland mining during his presidency. Multiple U.S. firms began exploring rare earth mining opportunities in Greenland. The U.S. government, through agencies like the Export-Import Bank, signaled willingness to finance Greenland mining projects. In 2020, the State Department opened a consulate in Greenland, the first permanent U.S. diplomatic presence there in decades. This was framed as part of a broader Arctic strategy, but the timing was notable. By 2021, American and Australian mining companies had secured preliminary agreements with Greenland's government to explore rare earth deposits. The projects were legitimately structured, with proper environmental reviews and stakeholder engagement. In other words, the actual work of securing access to Greenland's resources was happening through normal diplomatic and commercial channels. Trump's dramatic proposal to buy the territory wasn't necessary, and may have actually complicated these legitimate efforts by offending Danish and Greenlandic officials. This raises the question, was Trump's purchase proposal actually about securing resources? Or was it about something else? Perhaps the publicity, perhaps the appearance of a major deal, perhaps business opportunities that might follow such an announcement? The legal gray zones. One reason the Greenland situation is so concerning is that much of what Trump did exists in legal gray zones where presidential power is poorly defined. Can a president use official announcements to move markets in ways that benefit personal financial interests? There's no clear precedent. The emoluments clauses in the Constitution address payments from foreign governments, but not market manipulation. Can a president make foreign policy decisions influenced by personal business considerations? The Constitution requires that officials serve the public interest, but enforcement mechanisms are primarily political, impeachment rather than legal. Can family members of a president profit from advanced knowledge of policy decisions? There are no clear rules preventing this, even though it's obviously problematic. Trump operated in these gray zones constantly. He pushed boundaries without clearly breaking laws that could trigger prosecution. This is why much of the concern about Trump's behavior is framed in terms of norms and ethics, rather than specific statutes. The legal framework is inadequate to the challenge. The Greenland government's perspective. It's worth noting what Greenland's own government said about all this, because they were treated as props in Trump's narrative, rather than as a government with its own agency. Greenland's premier, Kim Kielsen, stated firmly, "We are not for sale and cannot be sold." He emphasized that Greenland is on a path toward full independence from Denmark and that its people must decide their own future. Greenland's foreign minister, Ane Lone Bagger, put it more bluntly, "We are a country, not a commodity." Greenland has been moving gradually toward independence for decades. The island gained home rule from Denmark in 1979 and expanded self-government in 2009. The long-term trajectory is toward full sovereignty, determined by Greenland's 56,000 people, not by external powers. Trump's proposal, and his anger at rejection, treated Greenland as a piece of real estate to be bought and sold between great powers, completely ignoring the aspirations and sovereignty of Greenland's indigenous Inuit population. This colonial attitude is particularly problematic given America's own history. The United States purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867 without consulting Alaska's native populations. The Louisiana Purchase involved France selling territory it didn't control, affecting native peoples who had no voice in the transaction. Trump's Greenland proposal echoed this colonial-era thinking, treating indigenous peoples as footnotes to great power transactions rather than as people with rights to self-determination. The lasting impact on foreign policy. The Greenland episode has had lasting effects on how other nations view American foreign policy and presidential power. European allies learned that they could not assume continuity in American policy. A president could suddenly demand to purchase Allied territory, then turn hostile when refused. This unpredictability makes long-term strategic planning difficult. China and Russia drew different lessons. They saw that Trump's approach to territorial issues was transactional rather than principled. If the United States was willing to casually propose purchasing allied territory, then perhaps American commitments to territorial integrity elsewhere, in Ukraine, in the South China Sea, in the Baltics, were equally negotiable. Adversaries also learned that Trump responded to flattery and deal-making, rather than to principled arguments about international law. This shaped how they approached negotiations with the Trump administration, emphasizing personal relationships with Trump over institutional diplomatic channels. The damage to American diplomatic credibility will take years to repair, if it can be fully repaired at all. The warning for the future. Here's why the Greenland story matters beyond one failed proposal. It's a template for how future corruption could operate. Imagine a president with business interests in mining or resource extraction. That president could use policy announcements, trade policy, defense policy, diplomatic initiatives, to create market movements that benefit those interests. The president could direct military or diplomatic resources toward regions where those business interests could profit. Family members and close associates could invest based on advanced knowledge of policy decisions. All of this could happen without clearly violating any specific law. The emoluments clauses don't cover market manipulation. Insider trading laws don't apply to presidents. Ethics rules rely on voluntary compliance and political enforcement. Trump demonstrated how this could work. He showed that a president could maintain massive financial conflicts of interest, make policy decisions that create profit opportunities for those interests, and face no legal consequences as long as political allies protect him from accountability. The Greenland episode was a dry run. It didn't result in a deal, so we didn't see the full corruption potential play out. But the pattern was visible. Presidential interest in resource-rich territory, policy moves that could benefit connected businesses, market reactions that could be exploited by those with advanced knowledge. Future presidents will have watched and learned. Without stronger legal frameworks and enforcement mechanisms, we should expect more sophisticated versions of the same pattern, the accountability that should follow. What should happen in response to the Greenland episode and the broader pattern it represents? First, Congress needs to pass legislation requiring presidents to divest from business interests. The current system of voluntary divestment and trust arrangements is clearly inadequate. If you want to be president, you should have to sell your businesses and place the proceeds in diversified investments you don't control. Second, insider trading laws need to be extended to cover the president, White House staff, and their immediate family members. If a policy announcement will move markets, those with advanced knowledge shouldn't be allowed to trade on that information. Third, the Office of Government Ethics needs real enforcement power. Currently, it can identify conflicts and make recommendations, but it can't force compliance. That needs to change. Fourth, Congress needs to exercise more aggressive oversight of financial conflicts. This means subpoenaing tax returns, financial records, and communications related to policy decisions that could benefit personal interests. And crucially, Congress needs to enforce its subpoenas, holding officials in contempt who refuse to comply, using inherent contempt power if necessary. Fifth, the Justice Department needs to take financial conflicts seriously as potential corruption. The current approach, where obvious conflicts are shrugged off as political issues rather than legal ones, enables abuse. None of this will happen without political will, and political will requires public pressure. That's why stories like Greenland matter. They document patterns of behavior that should concern anyone who believes public office should serve public interests rather than private profit. The media's role and responsibility. The media's coverage of the Greenland proposal reveals both the strengths and weaknesses of American journalism. Initial reporting was good. The Wall Street Journal broke the story accurately. Reporters confirmed details with multiple sources. The basic facts were solid. But the follow-up was inadequate. After the initial "Trump wants to buy Greenland" headlines, coverage moved on to the next controversy. The deeper questions about financial conflicts, about market impacts, about diplomatic damage received less sustained attention. This is a structural problem with Trump-era coverage. The sheer volume of controversial actions and statements made it impossible to fully investigate any single issue. By the time reporters could dig into one story, 3 new ones had emerged demanding attention. Trump also successfully exploited this dynamic. When a story gained traction, he'd create a new controversy to distract attention. The Greenland episode was briefly dominant news, then got overtaken by other stories: trade war escalations, staff firings, impeachment proceedings. Media organizations need to develop better strategies for sustained investigative focus despite the distraction machine. This means dedicating specific teams to follow particular stories over months or years, regardless of what new controversy emerges. The public's right to know. At the core of the Greenland controversy is a fundamental question. Do Americans have a right to know their president's financial interests? And do they have a right to know if those interests influence policy decisions? The answer should obviously be yes. Public officials serve the public. We have a right to know if they're serving themselves instead. We have a right to know if presidential decisions are based on national interest or personal profit. But the current system doesn't guarantee this right. Financial disclosure forms can hide ownership through complex corporate structures. Tax returns can be withheld. Business dealings can be kept secret. The public has to trust that officials will voluntarily disclose conflicts. And Trump demonstrated that such trust is misplaced. We need legal requirements that make conflicts of interest visible and consequences for those who hide them. Transparency shouldn't be optional for those who wield power over our lives. Moving forward. The Greenland episode is history now. Trump left office, and his proposal to purchase Greenland went nowhere. But the patterns it revealed, the conflicts of interest, the market manipulation potential, the mixing of personal business with state policy remain relevant. These patterns will recur unless we fix the structural problems that enabled them. Future presidents will test boundaries. Some will be more sophisticated than Trump, better at hiding conflicts or structuring deals to avoid legal tripwires. The question is whether we'll learn from this experience and build stronger safeguards, or whether we'll treat it as an aberration and return to assuming good faith from officials who may not deserve that assumption. The stakes are enormous. When presidential power can be used for personal profit, when policy decisions can enrich those who make them, the entire system of democratic governance is corrupted. Elections become competitions for access to graft rather than contests of policy ideas. Public trust erodes, cynicism grows, the social fabric tears. That's the real danger the Greenland story illustrates. Not that one particular deal happened, but that the system allowed it to be proposed, pursued, and only stopped by foreign governments' refusal rather than by American institutional safeguards. If you found this analysis valuable, if it helped you see connections between events that seemed random, if it clarified patterns that were previously opaque, then you're part of a community that refuses to accept corruption as normal. Subscribe, because these patterns continue. The next scheme is already forming. The next abuse of power is being planned. When it becomes visible, you'll want analysis that connects documents to consequences, that translates policy into plain language, that holds power accountable. The truth matters. Accountability matters. Subscribe so we can keep doing this work together.